Though voter fraud is almost non-existent in U.S. elections, many Americans believe otherwise. That's the subject of a new article Reason magazine reporter Eric Boehm penned, inspired by an explosive claim of voter fraud in Erie, Pennsylvania.
As Boehm recounts in his piece, the allegations of rigged ballots stem from a now viral post on X from Republican canvasser Cliff Maloney, who alleged that more than 50 votes registered from a single address there. Maloney claimed in his post that no one lived at that address, adding, quote, "We will not let the Dems count on illegal votes." But Maloney was incorrect. The votes were, in fact, legitimate. Before I give away any more, let's hear from the source, Eric Boehm, who wrote this piece for Reason, which highlighted how rumors of voter fraud spread like wildfire. Here he is. Thanks so much for joining us, Eric.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Glad to be here.
So who actually lived at this address? Let's start there.
Yeah, sure. So this was Cliff Maloney's post on X a couple of weeks ago was about a monastery outside of Erie, Pennsylvania. And it turns out that, yeah, actually hundreds of people do live there. I mean, I think at most addresses, if you saw hundreds of names registered, you would be maybe naturally suspicious. But these are nuns. It's a group of about 70 nuns, the Benedictine Sisters of Erie, who have been there working in that community for, nearly 200 years. It's like the mid-1800s, well established there. And the monastery, the sisters have put out, at this point now had to respond to this story with a series of statements basically saying that, yes, we do live here. We vote here. It's all legit. And in fact, if you had done even just if Cliff had done even just like the most basic fact checking here, he could have gone to the Benedictine Sisters of Erie's website and seen that many of the names that are listed there as members of that community are the same names that he had registered to that address. So this is pretty cut and dry, not a case of voter fraud. Those votes, if and when they are cast by those sisters, will be legit.
Well, it just shows, a lot of this stuff is weaponized. It doesn't take a lot of work to go through these voter records and the rolls. And I saw some interviews with these nuns, and they were quite passionate, too, which was amazing to see how vocal and active they've been in the community. So it's not like they're hiding in secret. They're out there and about political. With that being said, there's backing from groups to, I guess you could say, inspire citizens to go out there and do their own work. Can you tell us a little bit about that kind of effort that's happening across the country right now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is all driven by, what Cliff Maloney was doing is what thousands, if not tens of thousands of volunteers were doing all across the country in the last couple of weeks. I had people knock on my door here in Central Virginia to talk to me about the Trump and Harris both over the past few days. There's people going out doing this canvassing work. It's called to try to get people to the polls. It's part of a, get out the vote efforts, particularly in swing states, particularly in a state like Pennsylvania, where the margins are expected to be really thin. And obviously I think there is some incentive to create the perception of voter fraud or of election shenanigans, maybe, particularly on the political right. This has been a talking point, honestly, going back decades, right? Fear of voter fraud. I think it's only ramped up and become kind of more explosive and more politically powerful in the Trump years, and certainly given, everything that happened after the 2020 election. So I think it's important for the rest of us, for, people who cover this, obviously, in the media, like you and I, but then also just the general populace to be aware that there's, an incentive to kind of create these claims, an incentive to try to make the system look as though it's failed in some way, even before we get to election day, and that we should be skeptical of these things. I mean, we should be, I think, willing to, we shouldn't be willing to dismiss necessarily out of hand all claims of voter fraud, but until there is some substantial actual proof, we shouldn't go ahead believing everything that you read on social media.
Right, because, obviously it does occur that people vote illicitly or in some way that does not correspond to the law. What has not demonstrated is that it is so massive and just one-sided, right? You have people who are voting Republican doing that and people who are voting Democrat. I'm sure it happens. I got mailed I live in an apartment in D.C., and I got mailed the ballot for the previous person who lived there. I still get all his mail, and I put that ballot in the trash. I did not cast a second vote for the Libertarian Party, even though I could have. But maybe I couldn't have, because then later there's some screening thing that finds out, that he's not registered there, or he was registered somewhere else. So I'm sure it happens. It's just the vast conspiracy about it is not correct.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And look, there are processes in place, and that's something else that I don't think gets talked about enough. Is that even the results that we see reported on election night and in the days after will be unofficial results. There's actually a weeks long process that goes on first at the precinct level, then at the county level, and finally at the state level. Again, somewhat confusingly, this is also referred to as canvassing, even though it's actually a very different process than the political get out the vote efforts that go on before the election. But this is to verify and check exactly what you were saying, to verify and check all the ballots that are cast to make sure that the numbers are correct. And yes, there are instances of voter fraud. No election is perfect. I think when I went back, was writing this piece, I went back and found an Associated Press article from a couple of years ago that said they had looked through all of the records of 6 different swing states and found 475 instances where votes may have been cast either, maybe fraudulently, maybe just incorrectly, maybe counted incorrectly, something like that. 475 cases in a country where, 150 million votes are going to be cast, probably not enough to make any sort of swing in the election. I think, Ohio prosecuted a few dozen people after the last election for voting twice. These are typically mistakes, either mistakes on the part of the voter, mistakes on the part of the poll worker who should tell somebody, no, you're voting in the wrong precinct. You have to go vote over there, not over here. Some sort of mistake maybe in tabulating. What we don't have any evidence of, and what we certainly would have seen evidence of given the amount of scrutiny that was applied after the 2020 election, but we didn't see any evidence of widespread, broad, conspiratorial election fraud that was meant to swing the outcome from one candidate to another, in which case you're talking about tens of thousands, if not more, votes that would have to be cast. Look, there were something like 60 different court challenges in the aftermath of the 2020 election. There were electoral audits by state lawmakers in Arizona and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, and a few other places too, I think. And none of that turned up any of this evidence that, that Rudy Giuliani and other, particularly of Trump supporters, were talking about after that election. So if we didn't find it in 2020, I think it's probably safe to conclude that it didn't exist. And I think, look, you can believe in things like the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot, right? But until you see evidence of them, I don't think you should be giving them electoral votes. And so that's kind of where we are with the voter fraud thing, too, is that the evidence is simply, the evidence simply doesn't show that there is broad-based this kind of chaotic election fraud that some people, mostly on the right, I think, have an interest in creating the perception of.
Which leads to this point that Donald Trump in the last couple of days in particular in Pennsylvania, which is kind of ripe ground for this too, just because the electoral laws are, they don't have early voting, and, he was complaining about the long lines for on-demand mail balloting, and J.D. Vance was saying that there was voter fraud, so much so that the Republican Secretary of the Commonwealth called him out and said that's not true. Donald Trump said we caught him with 2,600 votes in Lancaster, but how much of this is really about something they truly believe, and how much of it is maybe to set the stage for another 2020 where they challenge the election?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is that. A lot of it is about creating that perception. Also, this is all, none of the votes have been counted yet. And particularly in Pennsylvania, this is going to be an issue, and it's something people should be aware of going forward. That's one of, Wisconsin being the other, one of 2 big swing states where they're not allowed to begin counting the mail-in votes until Election Day itself, which obviously means there will be delays in getting that number of votes counted, the number of mail-in votes that come in. Pennsylvania has something like more than 2 million mail-in ballots requested. So that's a huge chunk of the votes in the state that we likely will not know the outcome of on election night. And then that I think then feeds this narrative of we don't know the results, or the results might change as days go on. And rather than indicating fraud, I think that indicates that the process is working as it should, because it does take time to verify and to process, particularly those mail-in ballots, all of which have to be opened by hand and read by hand and processed and verified by hand. So that does take some time. But to your point about, the perception out there, I think this does matter. And I think really important to point out that there was a UMass Amherst poll last week that showed just 39% of people in that poll said they were very confident that their votes would be counted correctly in this election. Like there is this fear in the electorate, and it's not something that exists only on the political right. I think it does exist in the kind of general milieu of election anxiety across the entire political spectrum here. There is concern about this, and that will only I think, help anybody who wants to then benefit from this narrative of election fraud in the days and weeks after the election. The most important thing really is for people just to remain patient and let the process play out, because as we talked about, there are numerous checks in this process to make sure that we get the count right. As those numbers shift maybe a little bit one way or the other after Election Day, that's mostly proof that the process is working as intended, not evidence of some sort of fraud or malfeasance.
Eric Boehm, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Robbie.